Hello and welcome to another episode of 7th Tier Podcast, a weekly storybook brawl podcast focused on strategy and high-level play. My name is Jethro, and I am joined this week and every week by your friend and mine, the best co-designer of podcast logos I know. It's Sythesys. Syth, how's it going?
Yeah, it's good. We do have a new podcast logo. I think it looks really good.
Yes, I don't know how you've managed to find the podcast without seeing our new logo, but if you have, congratulations. Our podcast looks like this now. We've got a lovely 7-tier pyramid. So we're kicking off this week sort of like we do every week with our stats, but because it's been the holidays, last time we checked in with the stats, we were very new into the new update. So we're doing all of our stats since the, 65.0 patch? The most recent patch, fundamentally. I'll kick us off. So in the last 3 weeks, I have played 136 games, 94 top 4s, 35 crowns for an average finish of 3.41. Is straight down the barrel of my December average.
Sure. I have played some of the least I've played in quite a long time. I basically took 2 weeks off for Christmas. A very busy time in my real job and so on. So I have played a measly 43 games in that same time frame, but have 34 top 4s, 17 crowns, and an average placement of 2.76, which is pretty good. That's the highest average I've ever reported.
That's true. That's the highest average since podcast records began, and you're still trending at more crowns than bottom 4s. So that's maybe we should put on a column for that the spreadsheet just calculates for us.
This is twice as many crowns as bottom 4s here.
Thinking about it, I don't think we should put on a column that tracks that. I think that might be bad for both of us in some way for some reason.
So you played a bunch more than me on this patch so far. What has really stood out to you so far?
Yeah, I'm going to be brutally honest at the top here. So last time we spoke, we were talking a lot about the new heroes that just come out: Midas, Sharebear, and Sphinx. And I tried a lot of Midas out. Like, you were high on Midas after your first couple of games. We talked about it on the podcast, that you want to sort of play it a bit like a Super Gwen, where you're really getting the upgrades to the units that gives you some scaling on, whether that's Heartwood Elders or Happy Little Trees, or possibly Prince Arthur's, that's a bit of a gamble. You don't have the quest units to rely on. I tried that out with Midas. I've played 11 games with King Midas, 0 crowns, 4 top 4s, average finish of 5th. Oof. And that was when I stopped playing them. Honestly, yeah. I probably should have stopped after like 8. I don't think this hero is very good.
I think that is the community consensus. I think there were a lot of factors that played into my King Midas stats in my first few games. That the patch was pretty broken and there were a bunch of bot games and stuff that I think were skewing me perhaps towards overvaluing King Midas, or maybe just some high rolls, some variants. I'd only played like 5 games at the time. It really was a small sample size that gave me an indicator, but a lot of other streamers are calling King Midas one of the worst heroes in the game, and I'm not quite there yet because I have had nothing but good games on him personally, but I am definitely willing to fold to community consensus given my lack of experience on the new patch and say, yeah, I think King Midas probably just doesn't have a way to get to that point where they're strong enough late game. I assume that they're still mid game power spiky, and it's just that they fall off.
The problem I found with Midas is that their power spike window is really narrow. Because in the early game, when you get those pairs, it's possible I've been pairing a bit too aggressively, but if you get those pairs in the early game, they make you weaker. Like, they shrink your board down. Like, tripling a Fanny is so bad.
Yeah.
You really want a pair of Fannies. Yeah, that's the perfect number of Fannies on turn 2 or 3. Yeah, and so you have these awkward weak turns early where you've got the gold units, but the gold isn't really giving you anything back yet. And then you have this window in the middle where you're strong, and then that window collapses because other people get monkey's paws.
Yeah.
And there just isn't the time to dream out. Like, trying to dream out of Midas in time to get a treasure, there's just no time. I will say dreaming into Midas is sick. I've done that more than once.
Yeah.
Once you've got 3 treasures locked there, especially 3 good ones, getting to gold some good boys, gold some copycats, gold some pumpkins. Worth touching upon the other new heroes as well.
Yeah.
They're both absolutely busted, I think.
Yes. I think certainly I came in too low on Sphinx, for sure. Sphinx is just an insane hero. In my head it was like, you have to high roll the XP. There are a lot of opportunities to find that XP and have it be just absolutely insane.
I mean, if you get there on the Wish Upon a Star turn, which
God.
isn't like...
Because you're not down gold, normally.
Exactly. Wish Upon a Star, normally you've invested the 5 gold, which makes you weaker that turn compared to the average person in the lobby. They haven't had to invest that gold. They've been able to make themselves strong. But if you've spent 0 gold on that Wish Upon a Star, it's a coin flip. You might win that fight and just be Skip without a downside.
I've bought Wish Upon a Star and then bought an egg to use as a I'll win this fight spell. Basically, like you can do things like that and feel good about it. Like I my egg was always gonna die, but it won me the fight, and that's crazy.
That's a 2 gold plus 1 XP. That's definitely worth it.
Absolutely.
And also, it's worth mentioning Crystal Ball. I've had a couple of games where you do get the Crystal Ball on Sphinx, and you don't need that many turns for it to be completely insane. Like, you can get a Crystal Ball on tier 4, and then going into tier 5, you're going to have an insane turn, and going into tier 6, you're going to have an insane turn. The power spikes from everything being free is enormous.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Share Bear. The main thing we missed is how many awkward gold turns there are in the early game. Like, 2.1 is always awkward. You want to buy 2 2-drop minions. 3.0 is also super awkward. The difference between buying 2 3-drops and buying a 3 and a 2, or buying a 3 and awkwardly selling to the other 3 on the 5 gold turn is huge.
Absolutely.
And being able to get both of those spikes consistently, yeah, you're giving both of them to other random people in the lobby, which is nothing.
Yeah.
But being able to get both those spikes means you're going to be powerful going into those 3.1 and 3.2 turns, which are 2 of the turns that offer you the best scaling. They're the turns in the game where an XP spell or a gingerbread house has the most game remaining to pay you off.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think fundamentally, Share Bear has landed on slightly better than Cursed King, which I think is right. And I think I was just too low on Cursed King. Like, fundamentally, I hadn't adjusted enough for his new hero power. And, like, in my head, I was still taking 6 damage every game from Cursed King, and that's not quite true. I think Share Bear is meaningfully better than Cursed King, though. You don't take that damage. There are plenty of turns where you really don't want to be casting a spell, or, you know, Cursed King can't cast a spell and it's terrible. Share Bear is, I think, better. The downside of giving opponents some gold makes very little difference. Whereas when you happen to lose 6 life as Cursed King, that's meaningful.
Yes, that's the new heroes. I think Midas is straight in the trash, but you could do a lot worse than buying and taking Share Bear and Sphinx when you're offered them. Anything stood out to you on the ladders these last couple of weeks?
A few things that have gotten better. One that wasn't a big change, but made quite a big difference to how I have felt they play out, has been Skip. It really does make a huge difference to your early game to be guaranteed offered 3 3-drops on that first turn where you get to play as Skip. The odds that you find a good enough unit are like 95% plus. It's very like previously, sometimes you would roll that shop and you couldn't lock the first shop, you would roll at random, and you'd see 2-drop Darkwood Creeper, and you'd be screwed. You can't play. You're not only are you going to lose that fight, you're going to lose the next 3 or 4 fights, and you're just going to be dead.
You've paid so much health for that 2 XP at that point. Like, compared to if you just bought 2 XP from the shop during the game as Pied Piper or whatever, maybe you'd lose 10, 12 health from that, depending on how those fights go. As Skip, you can be paying 20, 25 health for your hero power. It's too much. It's not worth it.
Whereas actually, your hero power is a straight up upside if on turn what is 2.1 for everyone else, you get to go, here's my Brave Princess, here's my Donkey, here's my Lucky. Like, these units that can get you... Here's my Pig. These units that not only win you that fight consistently, but put you way ahead as well. Yeah. And you're just so much more likely to be offered those units. I have had significantly fewer... I had no choices and was just free-falling until tier 5 as Skip with the new changes. Even just that first turn, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Even if you're not offered one of the absolute nut draws like the Pig or the Lucky at that point in the game, you're so much less likely to be forced to take 2-drop or Creeper. You can't be forced to take 2-drop or Creeper. And even if you're taking one of the bad ones, like a Wretched Mummy is going to tie you that fight most of the time and give you the chance to then pick up the prized Pig or the Lucky to start snowballing. Because you've got extra chances to hit those.
Yeah, part of the problem was as well, if you start super weak, you have just a 2-drop. If you then pick up a prize Pig, well, you're not going to win the fight because you've got only one unit, and a prize pick is good, but it's not going to beat 4 units from your opponent. And there are loads and loads of rewards in this game for being the person winning fights, and almost no rewards for being the person losing fights. And so, as soon as you can get strong, you can start getting a ton of those extra bonuses that you can't get while you're free falling.
I want to quickly mention a trap that I've fallen into on Skip multiple times.
Sure.
Which is, so Skip, you sometimes end up taking Princess Peep in the early game. It's a completely reasonable unit. On those first couple of turns, you get a 4/4 worth of stats, even if you don't have any of the supports to go with it or whatever. Those will trade off absolutely fine. What this means is that Skip is now the only unit on which I can see Godmothers in the shop and think about taking them. And even then, it isn't correct. I don't think Godmother was good enough, even if you already have the peeps going and what have you. You just don't have the units. The toughness doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, Godmother is way past her prime. She used to be the dominant force in the mid game, and there's definitely some memory of that. But yeah, it has been a long time since I even saw, I don't see Fairy Godmother even when I'm I have 4 good units. She's just not good enough.
I don't see them unless I'm Skip, because also your cash isn't there as Skip to roll for extra 4s. Other people, when they hit tier 4, you're ready to roll for others. As Skip, you're like, I'll buy the 4 that I see. And the ways to pay off those peeps are Sporkos and Vultures. Don't try and get them with Godmother.
Yeah.
One to watch on the hero list for this week, I've got down as Mask.
Sure.
I've only played them 3 times. All our sample sizes on the podcast are pretty small. But with my 3 plays as Mask, I've got all top 4s, 1 crown, average finish of 1.67. And that's not masking into Skip. One of those games was... one of them was a fairly insane mask into Gwen into Mrs. Claus, which was just, I'm Gwen, but with enormous upside.
Yep.
Yeah, one of them was... This was what I thought was going to be an awkward mask game and actually just worked out, was mask into Pan's Shadow into Sad Drak.
Doesn't sound like the best. Yeah.
The Pan's Shadow was just, I got an extra gold this turn, and then Sadrak, I was just able to ride into a copy boy thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think in terms of the new heroes relative to Mask, Midas seems like a good hero to become in the mid game and then leave. That definitely seems valid. Or the opposite, be something in the mid game and turn into Midas later. Midas seems very good as a Mask hit, and especially if the community consensus is that Midas is bad and you're not going to see him in many games, then having that option available is pretty nice.
Yes.
It does, of course, mean the overall pool has been dilated. You are less likely to hit Skip now that there are 3 extra units that exist, heroes that exist. But I still think, if it had more good hits, that's pretty cool. Sharebear and Sphinx are awkward. Sphinx in particular, unless you're...
I think Sharebear's awkward, but Sphinx sounds good to me. I've never done it, but mask into Sphinx, cash in on the next couple of turns. I guess it's a bit slow.
Yeah, the issue is that you first get access to Dream on 3.0, so that if you're dreaming on that turn, it's not kicking in until 4.0, and you've played no hero power until 4.0, and that hurts. And then your Sphinx hero power hits on 6, and you kind of want to then dream out, but your spells are free, so you can't do it until 6.1. That sounds awkward, but probably fine.
I have also made the mistake before as Sphinx, I was doing Sphinx mage stuff, of dreaming out when I was tier 6, believing, oh, my hero power's done, and actually 2 spells in the shop is a really good hero power in the super late game.
Yeah, Potion Master proves that, absolutely. That's true. Sharebear definitely seems a little awkward. Some of the best turns to be Sharebear are 2.1 and 3.0, and you've missed those. It's still better than the absolute worst heroes, but yeah, not one you were excited about. So Mask looks like, from just a theory crafting perspective, looks like a relatively flat, probably slight downgrade. Just because those really high rolls are less likely, and I think some extra middling picks don't balance that out. As you said, one to keep an eye out.
Yeah, it's one to watch going into the next week, I think.
Sure.
I will say as well, another hero that's become good to dream into, who wasn't good on the previous patch, is Trophy Hunter.
Yes.
Now that Grimsoul is back in the meta, Trophy Hunter is no longer the F-tier, unplayable garbage that it was only 1 short month ago.
Yeah, in fact, I think Trophy Hunter is currently the best hero in the game.
Wow. Okay, that is not where I am. Walk us through it. What makes Trophy Hunter the best hero in the game?
So I'm going to start with my stats. It's a very small, it's a pitiful sample size. So it is the hero I've played most this patch. I played it 5 times, 4 crowns, and a second. So every game I've played has gone very well. Fundamentally, there have been 3 changes. So first of all, the obvious, they brought back Grimsoul. This is the late game Trophy Hunter comp that is kind of unassailable as the biggest realistic stats any comp can hope to achieve.
This is the most stats you can have on the board.
Yeah, the only comp I have ever seen have an integer overflow, though I believe they've fixed that now. But yeah, so if you have Grimsoul, Baba Yaga, Good Boy, you trigger your Good Boy 8 times in a row, and 2 to the 8 is 256 times Good Boy's base stats. Like, very, very ridiculous how big your team can get with relatively little. Like, you don't need treasures, you don't need anything really. A single good hit just wins you the game. And the pieces that has always been true of Trophy Hunter. They have, well, at least when Grimsoul existed, they had one of the best possible late game comps, really hard to attack, just a good thing. What they struggled with was the mid game. There was nothing good on tier 3, except kind of lucky for some extra econ if you could get a 3-2 to slay. And then on tier 4, you were looking just for Grimsouls and Friendly Spirits, and then ways to buff that Friendly Spirit. And that was just a harrowing... It was hard. It was a hard time.
Yeah, that was a stressful coin flip, tier 4 as previous Trophy Hunter.
But I think the overall Trophy Hunter environment has gotten much, much better. And there are a few units that I want to talk about here. So the first of all is Mummy. So back when Trophy Hunter was good, Mummy was a 5-cost unit. Was still really good as Trophy Hunter. One of the best things you could do on tier 5, buy a Mummy, have it attack, get a slay, wipe their whole board. That definitely happened. But now it's a tier 3 unit, and it's a way that you can transition into, like, it's not a good transition into the wrong piece. It's a unit you eventually have to cut. Once you get Grimsoul and Friendly Spirit, you can't play any other Slays or Last Breaths. It will steal the Grimsoul procs and you'll probably be sad. Unless this Mummy is one-shotting opponents, you would rather have Friendly Spirit trigger over and over again than Mummy. But it's a unit you can buy on 3.0, 3.1, put it in front of a Mim, and now that unit is trading for 3 other units. It's going to attack, slay, and then shoot 2 things for 6, or 5, I guess, in this scenario. And that'll win you a bunch of early fights.
Those 2-for-1s are really important on tier 3, like... It's all about quantity of units.
Yeah, so Mummy is one of the units that can really help Trophy Hunter feel like they have text even in that slightly earlier game. That's also true of Muerte. Like, Muerte got better when they gave it 5 health and Mummy existed, and Trophy Hunter plays a lot in that same space. They're both about Last Breath. So that's the kind of most thing on tier 3. That means there's 2 units you're directly looking for. You're looking for the Mummies, and then I think you should be looking for the Luckies. I do think when you get a Lucky Slay, it feels like you have a hero power. It's a lot of extra econ.
I want to mention in Trophy Hunter's early game, you're also actively looking for the Mims, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. You definitely like Mim and evil support and the good support to some extent if you're planning to get Friendly Spirit, but that's a little more awkward. But certainly the best possible thing you can have on tier 2 is Mim plus Cat, right? That's the only way you can have a hero power, but it's great.
Yes, it's the only Last Breath that exists, and it'll win you a fight if you get it.
Yeah, for sure. Again, every Last Breath and every Slay you pick up is awkward. If you get the Grimsouls, you're going to have to cut them, but it is worth... There are still things to go for, and it is worth picking up the Mummies, even if you have to cut it later. It's fine. Once you hit tier 4, things have gotten much more interesting, though. So previously it was just Grimsoul, Friendly Spirit. Now there are 4 units you're looking for, and that's way more. Like, as well as the units that are kind of generically powerful. I'm not going to... If you offer me 2 Heartwood Elders, I'm going to take them. I'm still addicted. But now there are a bunch of really exciting ones. Monster Book is one of the better things you can possibly hit. It's a 7/3. It's really quite good at slaying, especially on that 4.0 early 4 turns, especially if backed up by a Mim. And getting 2 spells at that stage of the game will win you a ton of fights. Again, it's going to get, it's attacked. It's already got the 1-for-1 because it's traded with the minions. 2 spells can easily take out 2 minions or even give you long-term scaling. If it casts Blessing with Athena, that's really big.
The list of available Monster Book spells on tier 4 is really small as well, right?
Yeah, so it's just 6 spells at that stage of the game. Falling Stars and Earthquake, which you can get at tier 3, and then Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Ride of the Valkyries, and Blessing of Athena.
So that's like 3 direct damage spells, which are sort of whatever. Lightning Bolt's probably the best. It's going to get you clean 2-for-1s on your Monster Book most of the time.
Yeah, almost always.
Earthquake and Falling Stars are kind of medium.
Fireball can be devastating. Like, Fireball can like a lot of people who are like something like a pup who has got a couple of just vanilla supports in the back get completely devastated by a Fireball.
Random Sporkos and Mims that have stuck around and what have you. But Blessing of Athena stands out on that list as not being like the others at all, in that you want it to happen as soon as possible in the fight. And it gives all of your surviving units permanent scaling for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And if you've got a Creeper and you can do, falling stars will also give you permanent scaling
Yeah.
on those units.
Yeah.
So you can actually have, if you're getting 2 or 3 monster book triggers in a fight, a 60+% chance that you're getting some scaling out the other end of the fight. And if you're getting that scaling onto a friendly spirit, you're going to get those stats a lot before the end of the game.
Yeah, this is also, obviously Trophy Hunter already has a really good late game plan, but it is worth mentioning, I have had Trophy Hunter get to tier 6 and been offered a 70/70 Storm King because I was just doing monster books in the mid game, and that's a great way to kind of bridge the gap before you get that insurmountable late game comp. Like, you can monster book in general, quite a good unit. I'm buying a lot of it.
Yeah.
And Trophy Hunter makes even better use of it, and like a lot better.
A 70/70 is going to wrestle on 6.0, like...
Absolutely, yeah, that might crush whole comps.
But they're fairies and what have you, they're 30/30s, 40/40s. Like, you're going to get your 2 and 3 for 1s now.
Cool, so that's Monster Book. The other new unit is Tweedledee, and this one took me by surprise. I didn't necessarily think of Tweedledee as something I would do on Trophy Hunter, but this actually happened straight after the recording of the last podcast where we said, I'm not sure Dwarves is any good. I went straight into a first place Dwarves game where I never transitioned out. All I did for the whole game was be Tweedledee Dwarves. So I had a couple of Tweedledees, I think I had a Golden Fanny or something, like just a kind of a support to go with them, maybe a
Some generic
Sting.
stats on them, yeah.
Yeah, and then just rode that into Lordies. Like on 6.0, I was like, cool, I'm ready to pivot out of this into Good Boys. I think I had a Grim Soul, but I wasn't running it or something. Or was running it as a Tweedledee. Gave up, found Lordies, and was like, cool, I'm Dwarves. And these Tweedles are insane. They slay to summon 2 90/90s. What? Yeah, I was just running that and having that be really, really good. Even without that kind of, fairly rare, I imagine, full Dwarves game, Tweedledee as a unit, as a 6/1 that slays into 2 1/5s, 1/6s, isn't very exciting. But if we're buying those Sporkos anyway, now it's an 11/1 that slays into a 5/11, however that maths, 6/11.
Yeah, but that made sense. Yeah, 6/11.
That's a great unit. That's so many stats. It probably it got a slay. It probably traded when it attacked, and it's made 2 5/11s. That's a huge pain to deal with. That's a really strong thing to be doing.
Tweedledee functions like a doubly, and it's another one of these units, like Wombats or like doubly, where when you gold it, you're getting double value on your stat ups at that point.
That is also true.
So it's going to get the slay, and then it doubles its own stats going into the switcheroo. Expressing this in audio makes no sense, but if it's a flat 6/1, well, I guess it's gold. So if it's a flat 12/2 and it slays, it's going to become a 4/24.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't slay, right? Like you always get the death rattle. If you slay, you get 2 of them. So yeah, Tweedledee, another one that bridges the gap. It's not where we're heading most of the time, but it is a unit that we can buy on 4.0 and gives us a realistic, quite big power spike. It's a very good unit on that turn. It's a good unit for most players if they've got any kind of support to go with it. Even like a baby root that's still kicking around is totally fine.
Yeah.
And then if you can get to that point where you have a Sporko behind it, or a Lady of the Lake, or anything giving it any pumps, even a Power Orb makes a huge difference. You can ride that for a while you find the Grim Souls and the Friendly Spirits.
That leads us on into the 2 sort of key pieces we're looking for on tier 4. So we've got the Grim Soul, who's returning to us, the 4-mana 5/1 monster that when it dies picks one of your slays and triggers it. And the Trophy Hunter's going to make that dies trigger into its own slays trigger in addition to the death rattle. And the Friendly Spirit, tier 4, 3/3, good monster. When it dies, give it stats to something.
Yeah.
Not something else, just something.
Exactly. One of the most powerful interactions that can happen is you get a Grim Soul, it attacks, it slays, you trigger Friendly Spirit twice. The first one targets itself, and the second one's twice as big. And especially if you're doing that, doubling that, tripling that, as we'll talk about in a moment, that becomes more and more likely that you can get just this huge... Even if it started relatively small, it's made itself bigger and then gets kind of out of hand.
And once it's made itself bigger, it's more likely to get the slay, and if it gets the slay and survives, it can then bump itself again, bump up ranged units behind it. We've got these Sporkos, these Ladies of the Lake behind it. You snowball out of control in the games really quickly when Trophy Hunter gets going.
And I also want to point out that it has that same multiplicative effect that Copy Boy as a comp has, where golding these units makes a huge difference. Like, once you gold the Grim Soul, or gold the Friendly Spirit, or gold the Baba Yaga that we're going to get to on tier 5, all of these more than double everything that's happening, because there's a feedback loop there where, because you're doubling and then the friendly spirit targets itself and now it's 4 times, or the Grim Soul is triggering twice, but again, the first one can target itself. There's that feedback loop that means that you're getting much, much more than double when you gold a unit.
So that's tier 4.
Otherwise, the only thing to mention there is do cast your buff spells. Like, you've got to make this friendly spirit bigger. A 3/3 isn't good enough, and you can't rely on supports forever. You've got to be casting your Worm Roots, your Stone Skins, Burning Palms. Got to be casting them.
I mean, those Stone Skins and Burning Palms are worth so many stats at this point.
Yeah. Cast them anyway, but yes.
Are we worm rooting mummies as trophy hunters?
Hell yeah. God, I love Wormroot. I cast Wormroot as often as humanly possible on tier 3. I love Wormroot. Mummy's a little awkward because you're investing in a unit that you are going to have to cut once you make the Grim Souls happen, but it's fine. It'll get you there, and that's the important bit.
While we're talking about these investments, this is more niche, but I think Trophy Hunter is one of the only heroes in the game where you can really capitalize on Book of Monsters.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Tier 2 treasure, where when your monsters die, it gives them a permanent +2 power. All of these are monsters. The Spirit's a monster, the Grim Soul's a monster, the Mummy's a monster.
The Monster Book's
the monster
a monster.
book
Yeah.
is a monster.
Yeah, absolutely. Monster Manual, absolutely a treasure that I'm aggressively pursuing. Like, I'm not going to buy random 2-drops most of the time, but sometimes I buy Mims, sometimes Cinderella happens, it can happen, and when it does, Monster Manual is crazy. Then we're moving on to tier 5, and this is where it gets kind of out of hand. Baba Yaga is the one. So part of the reason this comp is so much better than it used to be, as well as all these other changes, is that no one else in the game wants Baba Yaga. Some people want Grim Souls to flip their polys. Friendly Spirit's a good tier 3 unit. Tweedledee's good. Lots of people want Monster Book. No one wants Baba Yaga. Slayer's in a really desperate state at the moment. Maybe Sad Drak wants it. Maybe someone's got a big Choop. That can happen. It's not common.
Maybe you've got a Lancelot going on.
How? Which did you buy first? Did you buy the Lancelot and then the Baba Yaga? Like, how did that happen?
My poly turned into a Lancelot. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I think I came 5th in that game. It wasn't even good.
So yeah, most people are not looking for Baba Yaga, and you really, really want it. So doubling your Slay abilities. When you double the Slay ability, Grim Soul will trigger all of the Slay abilities of a unit. So if it has Slay give a unit my stats, it's going to do that twice. And they're incremental. It's not give double my stats to a unit. It's give a unit my stats, then give a unit my stats. And so if the first one targets itself, you get to give double the stats.
And you get more shots at that multiplication.
Exactly. And very quickly, once the Baba Yaga is golden, or we use some treasures, or we just have 2 Baba Yagas, it can get very out of hand, and it doesn't take much before you get to this late game comp that's kind of insurmountable. Honestly, 1 Grim Soul, 1 Baba Yaga, 1 Friendly Spirit, even vanilla, if that Friendly Spirit attacks and slays, you are getting so many stats. Like, that's 3 total triggers on Grim Soul, so that's the Friendly Spirit stats 6 times. And that's nothing golden. Like, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much at all.
There's turns on, like, the 5.0, the 5.1. And bear in mind those numbers. Those numbers are pretty early. If you're doing, like, a trees thing, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to be doing, you've got your Heartwood Elder, you've got your little baby root, you've just gathered that fairy, and you've got some 20/20s, some 30/30s. You're feeling powerful.
That should be strong.
Trophy Hunter can have triple digits.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
Straight away, and they're not done getting bigger yet because the Friendly Spirit's going to attack.
It is terrifying when you see that Friendly Spirit because you know they've got the best late game as well. Like, it is so scary. Yeah, so that is ideally what's going to happen.
It's worth noting the Baba Yaga works behind the Grim Soul as well.
Oh yeah,
we gave our Grim Soul a slay with our hero power, and so Baba Yaga behind Grim Soul Friendly Spirit in 1 and 2, we're getting multiplicative stats every time it triggers.
Yeah, absolutely. The other unit on tier 5 worth mentioning, you can do Baby Bear, but you probably shouldn't without a sting, and even with a sting, you probably still shouldn't. And you can do Wombats. Wombats are fine. If you've already got the Grim Soul Friendly Spirit loop, it is not worth including a Wombats to steal the Grim Soul procs a lot of the time, because triggering a Wombat 6 times doesn't help. There's nowhere near you've got enough space. But if you've made it to tier 5 without finding those key pieces, maybe you just got some monster books and some Tweedledees, like you've just got some of the good mid-game, stick with it, take more Wombats in front of a Sporko. When it slays summons 2 very, very large units, that's just a good bridging point and a backup. You can still have a hero power even if you don't find these key pieces.
Yes, you can still have a lot of stats on those on those turns. While we're doubling down, there's some treasures we should mention.
Yes, absolutely. So these are often treasures that are not super exciting. So on tier 5, Horn of Olympus is probably one of the least picked treasures. I don't have data to back that up, but...
So, Horn of Olympus, because we've never mentioned it on the show before,
Sure.
we should say this is the tier 5 treasure that makes your support affect all front row characters. So normally a support will affect half the front row, just the units in front of it. This says it doesn't matter where on the back row you put that Baba Yaga, it's giving +3 power and double slay to everything in the front row.
Yeah, so mostly this is really good with 2 Baba Yagas, and it's really good with Gold Baba Yaga and 2 more Baba Yagas. It can get really silly. That's kind of the ultimate late game, would be Horn of Olympus with tons of Baba Yagas. But it also lets you do better positioning with your back row, use your Lady of the Lakes to also support the Grim Soul or whatever. Like, we've talked a lot about supports you want as this character. Baba Yaga's the big one. Having that affect your whole front row means you also have a much better contingency plan. Often, you'll end up with this comp where you've got one big friendly spirit, one big Grim Soul, and then maybe like another okay-ish unit, maybe a monster book that you had left over that you probably want to cut because you want the Grim Soul to trigger the friendly spirit, but you're a little worried about it getting sniped. You don't want to get that with that 1 in 8, and you don't want to play just a monster book not in front of a Baba Yaga, because that's disastrous. I could get 3 friendly spirit procs or 1 monster book. I can't risk that. That's awful.
That one spell can be so small. Like, you can cast the Smite or the Lightning Bolt and they've just got a Heartwood Elder sat there.
Yeah. Whereas if the Baba Yaga is affecting your whole front row, suddenly that monster book is much more reasonable. 3 or 4 spells is text. It's definitely text, and no, it's not as good as the friendly spirit, and it might not always be worth that power drop, but it makes it much more reasonable if you're especially worried about losing the 1 in 8.
Especially when you've just golded a unit, potentially you don't want to go into the fight down a unit, but we've just got this Horn, and now, we're going to play something that's been sat on our bench since tier 4.
Sure.
Suddenly putting in the monster book can look appealing.
Absolutely. Then the other treasure, we're moving a little far ahead, but it's worth mentioning, especially because it's probably the tier 6 treasure I take. Like, I think Horn of Midas is probably the tier 5 treasure I take the least, and the tier 6 treasure I take the least is Evil Eye. And again, probably the best tier 6 treasure on this hero.
So Evil Eye, tier 6, double your support bonuses.
Yeah.
And what this means for a Baba Yaga is that it's 3 times the slay triggers.
Yeah, it gets out of hand very, very quickly, especially once the Baba Yaga is golden. That's 5 times the slay triggers now, and yeah, that's game ending, even on anything at all. So yeah, Evil Eye is one of those treasures that you should ignore as most heroes, because what tier 6 supports are you running most of the time? Unless you've already got like a Golden Grumble Gore, Evil Eye is not making the cut. But as this hero, it's one I've got my eye on for sure.
Really, the only support worth doubling in the game is Baba Yaga. Like, the only other thing Evil Eye's done is doubled Baba Yaga for regular slay comps.
Yeah, that's true.
Technically, you could double a Heartwood Elder, but there just isn't the time for the scaling to matter.
Yeah, and of the tier 6 supports, even though they're fine, a tier 6 treasure which is giving you plus 20 attack on 2 units, Singing Sword exists, right? Like, that's still terrible compared to the other tier 6 treasures, and so yeah, it's only ever really been Baba Yaga that's been super exciting.
I grouped these treasures together because they're both doubling down on the comp that we've already got.
Most of the time.
We've already assembled a ton of stats, and now we're making sure that we're the most unassailable late game combo.
So yeah, and then of course, we haven't actually talked about the tier 6 unit you want. It's Good Boy. It's always Good Boy. I mean, that's true for so many characters and so many comps, but it's unbelievably true here. Good Boy takes everything we've said about Friendly Spirit is true of Good Boy as well, except it always buffs itself, because it buffs every good unit. You really want to stay away from the Evil Twin, that ruins it, don't do that. But a Good Boy, because if I trigger Good Boy 6 times, you are getting it's not 6 times the Good Boy stats, it's 2 to the 6. That's 64 times Good Boy's stats. It gets out of hand almost instantly, and you should often, like, if I have like a 30-30 Friendly Spirit, it's cut for my 2-2 Good Boy. Like, because the Good Boy is so much better at filling that role. Otherwise, on tier 6, Echowood is happy to see all these buffs going around. Big fan. Robin Wood is really good. Often, this the Grimsoul or the Good Boy can be your smallest attack units. They would love to have more attacks. They're way better at slaying once they do. It will, unfortunately, often end up on the Baba Yaga. Whatever. You'll live. But yeah, really, otherwise there isn't a lot else that I'm interested in. This comp is very linear. It even doesn't take up many slots. Just put any good units in the other. Who cares? Don't make sure they're not slays. Make sure they're not slays and they're not last breaths, because that will. The number of times I've accidentally put a Lancelot in and ruined everything. Don't do it.
Oh, it's gross. It can actually be quite hard in the super late game, other than rolling for triples and casting the buff spells on your spirits and good boys, to figure out how to become any stronger.
Yeah, because your comp is relatively unassailable.
It's hard to be on top.
It's often about, at that point, minimizing the 1 in 8s or the 1 in 7s. Don't lose the game because your good boy dies first. Don't lose the game because your good boy got pigamorphed. And maximizing the odds of that often means you don't maximize your maximum. You don't min-max in this case. We're not trying to... Because the min-max would be good boy, Grimsoul, nothing else. It is much safer to do like Grimsoul, Good Boy, Friendly Spirit. And if the Grimsoul triggers the Friendly Spirit, that's not a guarantee.
It's not the end of the world. It's probably enough stats.
Yeah, it's probably enough stats, but it's not the 10-digit numbers you would be getting if you were triggering the Good Boy.
This is why I often don't like naturally tripling the good boys.
Yeah.
Like, having a pair of good boys and then waiting to knighthood one of them if you want to.
Yeah.
Like, making sure they both have fairly balanced stats. It's not... Because often with good boys, you sort of want one giant one little one.
Here, you want them both to be good, yeah. The only other thing you want to do is maximize the odds that the Grimsoul gets to slay. When the Grimsoul slays, the fight is instantly over. So, Hermes Boots is one of the best ways to do that. And then otherwise, just give it a ton of power. Singing Sword does that really well. Plus 100 Sword obviously does it super well. But, like... Make sure that the Grimsoul mirror, but don't even think about that. Just make sure that to the best of your ability, Grimsoul is able to slay. It's often enough, even if it doesn't. Honestly, like if you've got Golden Baba Yaga behind a good boy, if your Grimsoul doesn't slay, it just dies. Well, that's still triggering the good boy 3 times, and 8 times good boy stats is what Copy Boy does. You win those fights.
This sounds incredibly powerful. I think you might have talked me around to Trophy Hunter being the best hero in the game. I don't know that it's going to ever compete with my Pied Piper stats, just because Pied Piper has a month's head start. Is there any way we can beat this? What can we do? I'm scared.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So the comp does have several weaknesses. First of all, it often has a fairly weak backline. These Baba Yagas aren't good, naturally. They don't grow in any way, so if you can attack with a big enough Doom Breath or cast sometimes Lightning Bolt is good enough. Sometimes they've just grown a little bigger than Lightning Bolt, but Lightning Bolt or Smite can attack their back
Smite
row,
I like more.
and is often a good way to neutralize the doubling or because you can beat one good boy. You can beat one good boy. If you can't beat one good boy trigger, you aren't winning, but you can beat it once it's not eight good boys.
Yes.
The second thing you can do is make sure your front line doesn't get slayed. And the best example of this, where this is actually a decision, because obviously, I should just put all my 70 toughness units in the front line. You were already doing that. But one example of where this might not be true is something like mages, where it often feels good to have a ranged mage in slot 1, like a Spellweaver, because I want my 200 ranged unit to attack.
Yeah.
But actually, it's much better to put like a 30-30 in slot 1 and make sure their Grimsoul can't slay your slot 1. It's way more because if they go off, it doesn't matter how big you were. They're impossibly large. You're not catching them. But you want to just make sure that Grimsoul doesn't get to slay, and then again, maybe you can beat what they've got. If the Grimsoul slays, it's over. And so you want to maximize the odds that your front line doesn't get slain.
The example I thought of was Echo Wood. If you've got an Echo Wood that's getting some of its stats early from a fairies, but also is getting some stats late from a good boy or a friendly spirit or what have you, it's tempting to put it at the very back. It's going to be cashing in stats throughout the fight. Actually, we want it front and center so it can soak up potential slays from the opponent.
Yeah. Copycat is also, unfortunately, one of the worst things you can do against this comp. You won't beat it. You're not bigger, and Copycat as a unit will get slain by the Grimsoul. And yeah, it's unfortunate because it's usually one of the best comps, but unless you were already way ahead, you have Golden Copycat, Golden Good Boy, and they've got unupgraded Good Boy, unupgraded Baba Yaga. Yeah, sure. You happen to be... You were leagues ahead. But if you're on the same footing, their units are much, much better than yours. So yeah, stay away from those. Try to kill the Grimsoul. They are vulnerable to pick them off often if you kill that often any of the targets. Because everything is multiplying, taking out any single piece, like it's not a 1 in 8. Like versus or 1 in 7. Versus Copy Boy, if you take out one of the copycats, the other might get them there, and they still got the good boy. If you take out the good boy, they're ruined. Here, if I take out the good boy, they're ruined. If I take out the Grimsoul, they're kind of ruined. And if I take out the Baba Yaga, they're still in trouble. Like, any of these pieces falling apart is disastrous for the levels of stats you get. So yeah, Pigomorphs.
I found Scam Mages to have a lot of play for that reason in the Super late game. Things involving Ninth Book, things involving Copycat with Golden Monster Book.
I've
had that wreck me before, just because it doesn't take that many Pigomorphs before your comp doesn't do anything anymore. It can be a bit of a glass cannon.
Absolutely. My 1 second with Trophy Hunter was I was monstrously strong, had just hit the integer cap in the fight before, and they were Scam Mages. Yeah, I went into the final fight, they had Mimic Deck of Many. It happened to hit a Pigomorph on my guy, and I was like, yeah, okay, my comp is non-functional. I'm dead. Hooray!
And part of the thing about Trophy Hunter is, because your hero power kicks in quite late, you can take a lot of damage in the early game. Oftentimes, once you've snowballed to this finals composition, you don't have a ton of fights to give.
Yeah.
And it only takes being scammed once or maybe twice.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you don't come close. When you get scammed, it's not like, oh, so I didn't win, I lost. It's, oh, I didn't go off, so my units is a 3/6. Fuck.
Yeah, if your finals is a trees mirror and you're both on 20 health or whatever, it can go back and forth for 5 rounds. Here, if you're on 20 health and you get nerfed, you can take 20.
Yeah, absolutely. You just die from nothing because none of your units have text anymore. Yeah, so that's Trophy Hunter. I think one of the best heroes in the game. Well worth considering. Well worth learning the playstyle. They are very different. You have to make a ton of decisions that are non-intuitive. Your unit evaluation is very different. Romeo Juliet is an example of what feels like is good, but is actively terrible as this hero in a non-intuitive way, because it just means it makes it a nightmare to pivot out of a strong mid game into a friendly spirit Grimsoul thing, because you have to cut the Romeo and the Juliet. And you are working on both. You just got to get a feel for these things. Figure out which... You can't play any Slay units ever, except maybe Brave Princess. Yeah, figuring out what to do with Trophy Hunter it's worth putting the reps in. Don't be upset if you lose a bunch of your early games, or, you put that Lancelot in and it costs you the game. You just got to... You can only learn when you're full of the embarrassment of having cast that Lancelot.
I do want to talk about maximum embarrassment lines.
Sure.
It's late game. I'm Trophy Hunter, and I'm thinking I really want a Hermes boot. There's some Copy Boy out there, I really want Hermes boots. And you know what doubles as Hermes boots these days? Is Sad Drac. So I cast It Was All a Dream.
Oh no.
I was no longer Trophy Hunter.
Oof. Big oof on that one, yeah.
If you're wondering why my stats are behind Syth's stats every week, it's related to that.
Copycat is another unit that kind of naturally feels like it goes with these units, but the positioning just doesn't really work out. You can't try and do it realistically. You want the Grimsoul to be slaying, not behind a Copycat. Anyway, there's a bunch of units that having the pool of units I'm willing to take go up is so valuable, because the pool of units that I can't take has always been quite large. Not many heroes have. I cannot play this unit. It is awful for me. That Trophy Hunter absolutely has. They have a bunch of units that you just can't put in your comp anymore. And that's restrictive, and if you can't... Price Pig is another one. I love Price Pig. I will still play it on tier 3. It's a totally... if it slays... Oh no! Oh god, oh no. But...
You guys are missing out on Matt's hand gestures, and they're just S tier.
Once you get the Grimsoul, you have to cut the Prize Pig. There is nothing worse than a Grimsoul giving your opponent 1 gold. That's really bad.
The fact there's an animation to let them know that they've got it as well.
Yeah, no. So yeah, you've got to be very aware. You do have to do a bunch of different thinking. It's a lot like Peter Pants in that way. You're playing a different game. It's a linear strategy. It's not mirrory linear, but it's linear. And you have to put reps in to get to grips with it. But I think it's well worth doing in the same way that Peter Pants did. Maybe not, even if they don't end up shaking down as the best hero, they've got to be one of the best ones, and having it be a hero you're willing to play is well worth it.
Yeah, I think they're going to shake out into A tier. I think once the meta's adapted and people have learned the strats to play against them. Finally, we've got a tournament coming up. They it's slight deja vu from our last episode. They postponed the tournament at the end of December, which was great news for us because we weren't really able to play in that one. But now it's this weekend. So the what was the December qualifier? I think it's still called the December qualifier.
Yeah.
Is now weekend of the 7th and 8th. I believe we're both playing.
Absolutely.
How are you going about preparing for this, and what changes do you think might occur to your tier list or to how you play in the games based on tournament setting rather than ladder?
Yeah, so the tournament isn't consistent with how you should be playing throughout. Certainly the top 8 is a whole different beast, and when I'm talking about this, I'm basically entirely talking about the non-top 8 section, because there it stands out. And the biggest difference is your goals relative to ladder. So when you're playing on ladder, you should almost always be aggressively pursuing firsts, because firsts are the only reliable way to rapidly gain rating. You should be coming second rather than first is losing half of the MMR that you gain from a first often. And so you shouldn't be happy with seconds. You should be aggressively pursuing first. You should be playing heroes that, a lot of the tier list at the moment suggests the heroes with incredible late games are the ones that stand out. A while ago, it was all about the early games. Honestly, like Mrs. Claus was like an A because she would win all her early fights because they were competing with Galahad and Old Miri, these heroes that could be really strong, really fast. A lot of those have gone away.
Everything's slowed right down.
Yeah, often the best heroes are the ones that are really good late game. People like Pied Piper with their copycat strategies, and Trophy Hunter for me certainly. Horde Dragon stands out as another one that is mostly a very late game hero and is right at the top for me. I really like Horde Dragon.
Got to mention Apocalypse. Apocalypse all in on that late game.
Yeah, I've moved a little bit down on Apocalypse this patch. His 5 health really mattered, but yes, agreed. Late game heroes are in a good place right now, and it is worth thinking in a tournament you don't need to come first. If you came 4th in every single game in like 6 straight games on ladder, so it would kind of depend on where you are, but I would probably fall 200 rating if I came 4th in 6 consecutive games. It would be disastrous for me.
I would gain exactly 6 rating, or 31 if they were my first 6 games of the day.
Yeah, so you'll stay flat or you'll go down. Like, it's not. You shouldn't. 4 fourths in a row feels like you've wasted. 6 fourths in a row feels like you've wasted your time. 6 fourths here qualifies you for day 2. It would be great. I would love to have 6 fourths. Totally fine. It doesn't, and like the tiebreakers don't matter. If you stumble into day 2, it's the same as crushing day 2.
And all your points get reset going into day 2. All that matters is that you hit that 36th threshold.
It's technically your 6th tiebreaker that never came up in the previous. Literally at no point came up in the last qualifier across the thousands of players who played. Yeah, so fundamentally you just need to make day 2. And so 3rds and 4ths are really your bread and butter. And what you really need to be actively avoiding is those 7th and 8th games. Like, if you look at my stats, I have more 7ths than I do 4ths. Because the way I play is I'm going for first. Sometimes that means I take risky scaling lines and stumble into 7th when I could have been playing to just survive one extra fight, right?
The easy coin flip of this is sometimes your polys never flip, right? Like, especially without Grim Souls, if you take those polywoggles and then they don't flip on turn 3.0 or 4.0, those are fights that you're going to then be losing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you never got that scaling strength. Certainly that's, when I lose and feel bad about it, it's because the polys are still there.
Yeah, it's, you just need to fight for that 3rd and 4th. Fight to get to tier 6. Don't worry, once I'm tier 6, do I have a direction? And that often means things that fall off are better. Dwarves is often one of those comps that can be really strong in the mid game and then struggles a little bit if it doesn't find the Lordies. I like killing my opponents in the lobbies. That's another thing, actually, is that if you know someone it's worth kicking people while they're down. It's worth finishing people off, having them dead, to make sure you're above them.
Yeah, just because you're paired against the lowest person in the lobby doesn't mean you shouldn't be casting combat spells that round.
Yes.
You want to kick them till they're down, and they've got no reason to be going for scaling power. They've got every reason to be casting their combat spells to try and desperately cling on.
Yeah, it does lead to that, that classic prisoner's dilemma that combat spells come with of, what if neither of us cast it? Wouldn't that be fine? Then we'd both be richer. But, you've got to be you've got to be killing people and you've got to be fighting for that strength. This also means that some heroes get better. Loki is a classic, has a mid-game power spike, can often deal a ton of damage. We talked briefly about Midas. I think Midas will be better than he is on ladder. Midas isn't a very good first place hero. Peter Pants, despite my relatively high stats on him, is a hero that consistently comes second through fourth and doesn't get a ton of firsts. Perfect. Give me that all day. All day. Yeah. Oh. So yeah, prioritize. Apocalypse, on the other hand, disastrous in the last tournament. If you look at the stats, Apocalypse was, got nerfed, was one of the best ladder heroes, did terribly. By far the worst hero relative to his pick rate in the tournament, because you can't, if everyone is playing for mid-game strength, you're just dead before your hero power kicks in. That was my experience in the tournament, certainly with Apocalypse. You just die. And so
certainly that's how it looked on the coverage.
Yeah, I think both Apocalypse and Grandma could be meaningfully worse than they are on ladder in a tournament setting where people are fighting for mid-game.
And because everyone's fighting for mid-game strength, buying the XP that you would normally want to do as Apocalypse, as Grandma, as Morgan, it's so much harder to find the time to do that without dying.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, play like you're trying to get third and fourth. Don't play like you're trying to get first. You should, once you think you're strong, play for first, because it is a significant point jump going from third to first.
Definitely.
Don't, rest on your laurels, but pick your battles, right? If you don't think, if you've been offered a bad hero selection or, the early game hasn't gone well, don't go, well, the only way I'll ever win is if I get lucky on this brave princess. Like, I need to keep her in because it's my only route to victory. I have to get Hatbull. No, just play to live for 3 more turns. Like, it's fine. Just get your highest placement. Your goal is not to maximize your MMR games like it is on ladder. Your goal is to maximize your points, and every placement you are higher is huge.
Play for that one extra placement every round. Yeah. Always be strong.
Another example of the way the points break out a little different. 2/4 is better than a first and an eighth, and that is so not true on the ladder. Like, a first and an eighth on ladder would be okay. Like, usually I lose more for an eighth than I gain for a first, but 2/4 would also definitely be a loss. But here, 2/4 better than a first and eighth, and that's, again, really emphasizes how much you want. It is not worth taking those high-risk strategies as much. And finally, although we're saying all this, don't overreact. If you play every game as if it was a ladder game completely normally, if you're a good player, you'll get there. Like, don't be like, oh, this is tournament, these players are meaningfully... It's everyone who qualified for Mythic at any point. They are not necessarily, you're not playing all streamers. You're not in a lobby with the top 30 players in the game. You don't have to be like, I'm just going to die. If you've been to Mythic, you've played against lobbies that were harder than your round 1 tournament opponents, I reckon. Like, treat it like it's a normal ladder game and you'll be fine. Keep in mind our advice, don't overreact to it. Play it, don't think about it.
The majority of players aren't spending their free time listening to podcasts about how to get better. You have an edge over the majority of players in this tournament. I'm prepared to call that a show.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, good luck everyone in the tournament. We'd love to hear from you if you think any of our advice has really helped. We'd absolutely love to hear that. Or even if you make day 2 and you want to shout us out on Twitter or anywhere, we would absolutely appreciate that.
Oh, that's true. That would be great. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on the Discord. I'm Jethro. He's Sythesys. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at 7th Tier Podcast, the number 7, the word podcast. I should mention as well, if our hour isn't enough Brawl podcasting for you every week, there is another podcast out there. They're called Book of Heroes. I've been enjoying them. They did an episode over the holidays called 7 Habits of Highly Effective Brawlers, which I thought was really good. It's kind of a timeless level up episode looking at ways to improve the game. So it's less of that week-to-week meta-analysis that we do here. And it's definitely worth checking out if somehow you found us but haven't heard them before. They're some good guys. Finally, don't forget to catch Syth's stream. I believe you're streaming every day this week from 9 a.m. UTC.
Yeah, that is the plan. New year, new stream schedule. Gonna be pushing a little bit harder to stream more. Really, we've always highlighted how few games I actually end up playing. I think when you stream schedule, I'm gonna maybe actually beat you for a week, and I think we're gonna try and turn more games into hitting 5k for once. I'm consistently top 100, but almost never top 10 or whatever. And I think if I play a bunch more games, I can maybe hit that target.
That's very exciting. I look forward to watching that race over on twitch.tv/Sythesys. We'll be back next week with the same content, but we'll be saying different words. Until then, don't forget, If you offer me 2 Heartwood Elders, I'm going to take them. Have a great week.